Introduction. So, good afternoon, everyone. The developments we are discussing today occur at a critical juncture for the Middle East, and the recent U.S. Israel strikes on Iran-linked targets, combined with the passing of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, raise very fundamental questions about Iran's leadership succession, regime continuity, and the future trajectory of its regional strategy. Today's discussion will explore how these events may reshape regional dynamics and what they mean for global security and the counterterrorism. Today, we are very fortunate to have an outstanding expert with us today to help unpack these developments from strategic, regional, and the counterterrorism perspectives. And before I introduce, first, I would like to introduce our panelists. And the first, Philip Simait is an expert in Shia militia groups, Iranian external operations, and the other Iranian proxy groups. He has lived in Lebanon and has also worked as a researcher for the University of Maryland with the Atlantic Council and was a fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Philip was among the first analysts to systematically document how Iran organized and deployed foreign Shia fighters from multiple countries to support its operations in Syria and Iraq. Philip has testified before the U.S. Congress and briefed multiple U.S. government agencies. We also have another distinguished speaker, Mohammed Al-Basha. He is the founder of Basha Report, LLC, a boutique risk advisory specializing in Middle East and East African affairs. Al-Basha brings a practitioner's view of the Middle East security environment, combining risk advisory experience with real-time regional analysis, which helps translate complex geopolitical developments, such as Iran's regional strategy, into practical policy and the security implications. His research and advisory work on maritime security, food security, strategic competition across the Gulf and the Red Sea regions provides important context for understanding how Iran's actions affect regional stability, supply chains, and the international trade routes. So our third speaker, Mahmoud Shahra, is former Yemeni diplomat and an associate fellow at Chatham House, specializing in political analysis, conflict resolution, and economic development. Shahra has been directly involved in UN-led diplomatic efforts to resolve the Yemeni conflict, giving him first-hand insight into the complexities of negotiations between the Yemeni government, the Houthis, and international mediators. And having spent a decade working at the Yemeni Prime Minister's office and the cabinet across three governments, Shahra brings rare institutional knowledge of Yemen's political decision-making during both pre-war and the wartime periods. So, looking at the backgrounds of our panelists, we believe today's event will be a unique event that brings insights and perspectives from the region. And by the way, please use Q&A function for your questions and the comments. And the first, I would like to begin asking our speakers for their assessments with a question on strategic impact. So my question is, from a strategic perspective, how significant are the recent U.S. Israel strikes on Iran-linked targets? And do these strikes meaningfully alter Iran's regional posture, or are they more symbolic signals of deterrence? So on my screen, I can see it up. Philip, you can start, then Basha, and then Shara. Philip, go ahead, please.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I would say in terms of kind of strategically planning this out and then also kind of executing, what it looks like to me is this is kind of the IRGC on autopilot. I mean, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, where there were kind of prior assembled systems that they would use and also responses that they would engage in. I mean, I think a lot of it is kind of a facade, if you will, for higher amounts of power. They're very, very big into propaganda and very, very big into kind of the marketing of what they're doing, albeit they may not actually have certain potentials of certain capabilities that they often like to say that they do. However, that doesn't mean that they're not creating great amounts of damage. It doesn't mean that they're not hurting the economy in the region. And it also doesn't mean that they're not sending very strong signals when they are feeling threatened. And I'll give an example of this. It's very clear from a lot of the recent drone attacks in Iraq. They were targeting the PUK dominated areas in Kurdistan. The PUKs had an okay relationship with the Iranians for many years, but part of their signaling was, we're going to hit targets in your area if you want to work with a Kurdish insurgency that may occur in Iran. So they're still kind of playing games, even in the microcosm, regionally speaking, and also within sub-regions within the Middle East, to make sure that they can send those messages. And I would say, diving into how they view the situation, given it's an existential crisis for them, we can't remove that in terms of the analysis. The IRGC genuinely believes this, and they're executing accordingly. And this is also why you're seeing ballistic missiles being fired off as far afoot as Cyprus. You're seeing Oman repeatedly hit just to send those signals. So I'm of the impression, again, the IRGC really wants to pull something off. They would love for a higher casualty kind of event, but I think there are capabilities that at times they are lacking. So instead, what they do is they cover it with a lot of propaganda.
Thanks, Philip. Al-Basha, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I'm going to be highlighting the proxies. This is timely because yesterday, I think Hezbollah surprised many observers by their capabilities to fire over 50 rockets and missiles from multiple locations targeting North Israel. And this, the strike is in line with their new modus operandi of where Hezbollah will be firing a wave of missiles to soften up the targets, overwhelm the air defense systems, the Iron Dome, and the radars, and etc. And then Iran goes minutes later and starts firing their short-range ballistic missiles to create most damage. So with Hezbollah getting involved in this war and getting involved in an aggressive war, we recently saw the General Secretary of Hezbollah get on TV, because there's been a lot of criticism that Hezbollah joined the war not because using the words or borrowing the words of Naim Qasim himself. He said that for the 500 of Hezbollah members were killed, and for 15 months there have been continuous Israeli violations. But the timing of Hezbollah's involvement was right after Khamenei was killed, and so the Lebanese public are sort of, not the non-Hezbollah supporters of Lebanon have been kind of like annoyed and frustrated that Hezbollah, did not join the war, even because they lost 500 men or there've been violence in 15 months, but they joined the war because their supreme leader was killed. It's a lot of people now questioning whether Israeli intelligence and the coalition coverage of the airspace in Lebanon, and doing the work for the past almost 2 years, where Hezbollah was able to dupe all these militaries and go down south from Hezbollah, looking at Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They have not been as engaged because they are right now on recovery mode and survival mode. I think Hamas is more focused on how to maintain tens of thousands of its public servants, and they're the new government structure that's going to be built in Gaza. IDF has been focused on dismantling more tunnel systems, capturing cells here and there, surgical strikes. But overall, the conflict in Gaza and in the West Bank and other parts of Palestine has been limited to what you could call low intensity, low frequency conflict right now. And we're not seeing much tractions from Hamas or any other group in Palestine at this point to join the war to support Iran. And I think Hezbollah today, there was the first written statement by Mujtaba Khamenei, the new Supreme Leader, the son of the late Khamenei, and he clearly mentioned that Hezbollah and other groups like the forces in Yemen, are going to be playing a bigger role in this a proxy umbrella, hinting that they've done quote unquote studies to show what they could be doing next, and so yeah, so this is the situation when it comes to Hezbollah and Hamas. I'm not sure if someone else is covering the Iraqi groups, but I could jump in later on it. Okay.
Thanks, Valsha. Shara, so what do you think about this strategic impact? You're on mute, Shara.
Thank you, Mahmoud, for having me. I think definitely the impacting the war is impacting the region, especially the Gulf state. I will cover highlight the Gulf states and Houthis. Despite the Saudi Arabia and UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and Oman were undertaken an intensive diplomacy and lobbying to contain this conflict. And to stop the war. But they because they know and they have an expectation about the Iranian regime behavior that going to target them, aiming to increase the cost for the war for the U.S. Tehran, in general, does not rely on Strait of Hormuz as a strategic pressure tool. It's in the Gulf. It also has another important card in Bab el-Mandab Strait and Red Sea through the Houthis in Yemen. Houthis presence along as an additional ability to influence the international shipping and open another pressure front within the regional conflict. Some assessment and information circulating in circles in Sana'a, close to Sana'a, that Tehran asked the Houthi leadership to stay calm and avoid full escalation at the stage. This appears to a part of a broader strategy to prolonging the war and exhausting opponents over a longer period of time, rather than using a pressure tools in an early stages of a conflict. In this context, that even Tehran may not want to use it too early. The card of Houthis from a conflict management perspective, it doesn't make sense to use all pressure tools at once. They want to preserve their Houthis value as a deterrence card. Other things also that we heard like 2 days ago, the member of the National Committee at the Iranian Parliament, he said that Houthis, they are in a special mission and they are going to be activated in a proper time. So it's not their time right now.
Thank you, Shara. So, by the way, our audience, please use chat box for the comments and the questions. And so far, we have seen the decapitation, which has been a common method used against Salafi jihadist groups and the cartels as well. And but we have seen it in Iran as well. So my question is about leadership succession and regime stability during the strike. So with the passing of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, the question of succession becomes central. Do you expect continuity in the velayat-e faqih system, which is the guardianship of the Islamic jurist, or could this moment create meaningful political or institutional shifts within Iran? Philip?
Well, I mean, obviously, just from the proxy angle, the proxies that were fired up to do a lot of this stuff, whether it was Lebanese Hezbollah or the variety of groups in Iraq, all are hardcore believers in the absolute velayat-e faqih ideological system. But what the influence comes is within Iran, I think we're now seeing where the system, while on paper they're saying it still exists and it's still functional, I think it's been pretty much usurped by the IRGC. In times prior, Khamenei, at the very least, had a way to push back if the IRGC wanted to do certain things. Not saying that he didn't have a very close relationship and was not rather radical himself. Mujtaba, on the other hand, is not of the same qualities as his late father. And I think, it demonstrates kind of another piece to this. I know Basha just mentioned this with Lebanese Hezbollah, where the groups that are now operating, I mean, I would do want to say this on the side for absolute wilayat al-faqih and what they're doing. It's not as if this is an extraordinarily popular form of ideology within Islam or within Shiism at all. The Iranians have had to really rely on the core groups within Iraq in particular. You look at the groups they're utilizing, Katab Hezbollah, which is like the hardest core of the hardest core, Harakat Hezbollah al-Nujaba, Harakat Ansar Allah al-Fiyi. You have organizations like that, Katab Sayyid al-Shuhada. And in doing so, it also means they can't, it doesn't really show for me, a degradation in terms of what they have done over time. Because they've always relied on those groups. They've always given them the best arms. They've always given them the best training, but the numbers are finite and they're rather small. And by calling on this repeatedly, I think it will cause extra strain. And you can see, I mean, Basha gave the great example in Lebanon where, even Shia are calling them out and saying, oh, so you'll do it when the Wali al-Faqih, meaning the supreme leader gets killed. But meanwhile, 5 other, Harakat Amal guys were killed in an Israeli airstrike. No response there. Got it. I mean, no one should be surprised by this. But I do think the internal cohesion that's going on within Iran is now driven by IRGC. I think the Islamic Republic will be something different, far more militarized, far more aggressive, and far more radical in terms of an ideological belief structure. Mujtaba himself is rather apocalyptic. He's a true believer in wilayat al-faqih. I love how they've also elevated him in terms of clerical status. They did the same thing with his father. But we're seeing kind of a motion there where it's no longer, and we saw this with Khamenei, meaning Ali Khamenei's ascension early on. He was a Hujjat al-Islam. He was a lower level. He was not Ayatollah. He was not a Marja, and he was just kind of pushed up. And now we're seeing it with Mujtaba, who also doesn't necessarily have the same religious scholarship either. So it's just degradation in terms of what Ayatollah Khomeini really came up with for his ideological system for Iran.
Yep. Thanks, Philip. And Al-Basha?
Yeah, so one of the key components of arguments why Mujtaba Khamenei was not going to be the supreme leader was that the Islamic Revolution itself of 1979 was against the monarchy and against inheritance of power, and so they wanted to change that. And so people who believed in the core value of the Islamic Revolution were saying, Mujtaba cannot be the next supreme leader because his father, it's his father's son, and now it's a theocracy, sort of a monarchy, another form of a monarchy. However, I think he was chosen because he was the Islamic Revolutionary Guard candidate. And right now they're running the show. Whether people want to sign up to the whole theory that the civilian side of the house running in Tehran is just doing the show to show that there is confusion or lack of coordination or lack of control with the military, and they both are kind of like I like how Philip said it, but it's the military is doing what the military has been trained to do. It's moving forward autonomously. They have a list of target, decentralized, and they're just carrying out with the operations. Now, Mujtaba, one of the things that served his decision, that backed his decision to be the next supreme leader, is what in their 12-very Islamic culture also is to seek vengeance for blood. And so now you have someone who have PTSD from the Iran-Iraq war. He just lost his father, his wife, his child, and he survived at least one direct assassination attempts, maybe twice. And so from the message today, he is signaling, one, even if the U.S. or Israel wants to stop this, we will continue. He's raising the ceiling of demands to that they want to expel U.S. presence and U.S. bases in the Gulf. They even talked, which remind me of the Houthis, they even talking about reparations, compensations. Soon we're going to see the supporters of the regime call for the Saudis to pay and other Gulfis to pay for salaries. and threatening that costs will be higher with pushing the Houthis to shut down he didn't even mention the Houthis. He said the forces in Yemen. So calling upon them to shut down the other strait, which other generals also have said, which mainly means shutting down Bab al Mandab and continue to shut down the Hormuz Strait. So we've sort of did not get the scenario that people were hoping to get in Venezuela. And we got another Kim Jong-un plus.
Thanks, Basha. Shara?
Yes, regarding also to the implication, because there is a huge, like a lot of questions and asking about Houthis, how Houthis are seeing this war. In general, it's Houthis are part of the axis of resistance. Houthis views the conflict through an ideological lens, seeing it as a religious war between. This is the Houthis' perspective. This is they think from their perspective that there is a war between Islam and unbelief. This is Abdul Malik al-Houthi speeches in TV during Ramadan. Their discourse often say that all unbelief has to come together and all Muslims must confront it collectively. This is and also they are supporting with a text in Quran and Malazim for the Houthis documents or ideological documents. For these reasons, they do not see the confrontation only as they are as the U.S. and Israel are targeting a country that provided them a training, expertise, advice, logistical support, and financial support. And instead, they approach it from a broader ideological motivation that go beyond the traditional political calculation. So that give us an inductor that Houthis are going to join, but because they feel it's a kind of ideological or religious duty. At the same time, Houthis still own military capabilities. Particularly in the area of drones, estimates indicates that the Houthis have a large stockable of drones that could be used over an extended period. Moreover, Houthis has become somewhat capable of continuing even without Iranian support. Yes, the Houthis can survive without Iran because they are self-sustained, especially in financial revenues. This is largely due to Iran transferring a military also manufacturing technology to them over the past years, allowing them to develop relatively a local production capabilities in areas such as drones and some missile system that can make them survive.
Yeah. Thanks, Shara. I think we should definitely talk more about Houthis in my questions. So we saw their active involvement right after October 7 attacks. And also here today, we have another distinguished speaker. But first, I would like to introduce him before asking the same question to Dr. Roshandel. So Dr. Ibrahim Roshandel is a former Iranian diplomat and a geopolitical analyst specializing in revolutions, political system change, and the national security. And Dr. Roshandel is a member of the Heritage Think Tank's Leadership Club, and it serves on the Strategy Council of the Iranian Democratic Republicans Congress. His work focuses on geopolitical strategy, regional and international conflict resolution, and the development of social and political movements. So, Ibrahim, the question is about leadership succession and the regime stability. So what do you think about it?
It's about the first question you asked, or about
the third question, the second question, with the passing of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, and the
okay,
question of
the
succession
third
becomes
question.
central. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate for being here. I just wanted to start with some important things probably we need to clarify exactly what is the system, the structure of power inside of the Iran's regime, and how Khomeini, as the first leader of this regime 47 years ago, relied on to get his authority based on the Shia's belief to be a jurist, to be high level of Shia knowledge member. And finally, after he passed away, Ali Khamenei relied on his political background, and the criteria switched or shifted from being marja or Shia a jurist to a person who has spent lots of time to show his loyalty to to Khomeini, and also the first leader, and also he is very loyal to Khomeini's ideas. In the third generation, the third leader, which we see that after this attack, Ali Khamenei killed, and he introduced the elite members, elite parliament, we call it. They introduced his son as the third leader. Right now, we see that this criteria also has been changed. This criteria, why change? Because Ali Khamenei's the most supporters were from the security and the intelligence service of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and right now they are trying to use this opportunity based on the ongoing war Iran's regime got involved. They try to keep him in a position that he doesn't appear in a public, but he published his first letter today. It says that we are not going to stop our attack to the United States. We are not going to give up. But he mentioned something is related to the second question, probably Mr. Cengiz asked all of you. He clearly emphasized that we are going to open new fronts, open new areas for the United States and Israel. I'm using this opportunity to give you what is the feedback, what is going to happen after this situation. As you know, that President Trump said we are not going to accept his leadership. Probably if he get killed, we will see the three scenarios inside of Iran. The first, we will see his successor, very weak leader with the great power of under the shadow of Iranian intelligence and the military service, the Sepah IRGC. And the second scenario is we see some gradually power shift to make the IRGC to be empowered as the first leader, as the first power holder in Iran. We call it Praetorian system. And the third one is the United States understand that the technocrats overseas, the almost diaspora members between 5 to 7 million people, they have created very strong opposition group with very good perspective for the future of Iran, the democratic Iran, and they are going to participate inside to create or structure very good democratic government. This is these three scenarios I'm predicting that will happen very soon.
Thanks, Ibrahim. So I think you already mentioned about the proxies in the Middle East. I think we should really deep dive and to talk more about the responses from likely these Iran-backed militia groups. So my question for each of our speakers again, Iran has long relied on proxy networks and militia groups across the Middle East. And how do you assess Iran's likely response through these actors, and which groups or theaters should we watch most closely for escalation? And Philip?
Okay, so I think I had mentioned this earlier, that we have to look at core networks that the IRGC utilizes time and time again. And within Iraq, the big leadership network there is Kataib Hezbollah. Kataib Hezbollah has kind of been the center of the core with other smaller and other groups that kind of surround them. They were taken out of the Badr, out of Falak Badr, out of the Badr Corps, the Badr organization. What the Iranians have done is they've built these cohesive circles where it's more and more loyal and more experienced people until it's kind of in that tight group. Lebanese Hezbollah was a very, very similar kind of model as that. So I would look at Lebanese Hezbollah, Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, Kataib Sayd al-Shuhada, which was actually splintered off of Kataib Hezbollah, but is still extraordinarily ideologically loyal and also militarily loyal, and their leadership has always been IRGC. That's another one. I mentioned before, and they were just recently bombed, Harakat Ansar Allah al-Wafiyyah, which worked very closely with another group called Harakat Hezbollah al-Nujaba. They were fighting in Syria. They've become very ideologically loyal. There's experience utilizing drones, utilizing rockets, other ballistic missiles, smaller types of equipment. But that would be that first core that I would look at. And I don't want people to believe that just because this core is operating, that means that the Iranians don't have other potentials here. The Badr organization, for instance, which I just mentioned, they have a very large presence within the Iraqi parliament. They have the largest presence within the so-called Hashd al-Shabi, or the Popular Mobilization Forces within Iraq. That's the government-sanctioned kind of umbrella group that's run essentially by the IRGC. Their second in command is Abu Fadak from Kataib Hezbollah, but they run the largest kind of militia section there. We've seen other groups that were also targeted by American airstrikes. One is called it's the 30th Brigade. That's the Shabak Shia, that's kind of localized groups. Sometimes they're ones that you're not going to necessarily know because they're not claiming anything. And something in Iraq that's been going on is the creation of front groups. So this is a process that's been going on since time immemorial when it comes to Iranian proxy groups in the region. You might remember back to Lebanese Hezbollah and having, Al-Jihad al-Islami taking, or Islamic Jihad taking credit for bombing American targets or kidnapping Americans. They like using front groups, but we now see kind of an industrialized, internet-based way of doing this that really hit its stride starting in 2019. This is something that Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis both killed together, both IRGC QF guys did in 2019. But after they were killed in 2020, there's been this proliferation of these front groups taking credit, sometimes for real attacks, other times for fake attacks. And the question has been posed to me a number of times, why do it when we already know who's behind it? We already know that Kataib Hezbollah, we already know that Nujaba, we already know that Kataib Sayd al-Shuhada are behind this. Why do they need a million names? And I think, they look at kind of the Western sphere, the analytical sphere, and understand it causes confusion. They also understand that even domestically, it looks like they have far better capabilities and capacity. It's interesting. You read some of the press that comes out of regional publications where they'll say, oh, this new militia. Well, there is no new militia. It's a guy who slapped a patch on. They have some iconography on Telegram. They created a song. Some guy says, I'm Abu Hassan, whatever. And he's now the spokesman for it, even though there's no picture of him. It's just to kind of put more sand in the gears, if you will, to confuse what's going on. But also, in the other sense, regionally speaking, it's to demonstrate that there's probably a far greater capacity that they actually have. And that has worked successfully in Syria, where, they would create one fake group after another one, or it would be a guy with 25 followers, and all of a sudden it's, Saraya al-Quds, or, whatever they want to call themselves today. And then it would start recruiting people in, not knowing that it was an Iranian organization, or not knowing really what they were doing. So again, I think looking at that, it's another symbol for me that when we're looking at the proxy groups, they are following that autopilot type of move, because this has been something they've been doing now for over 5 years, 6 years. It's the same thing, different day. But in terms of those groups you were asking about, I would look at them. Another one I want to add, and I'm sorry I keep going on about this, is Asayibah al-Haq. Asayibah al-Haq, you'll see a lot of commentary. It's always coming from really interesting angles, saying this group, well, they said that they might disarm. And I want to tell everybody here this: there is not a single Iraqi Shia militia that was being honest when they were saying they were going to, quote unquote, disarm. This is back in December of 2025. Qais al-Khazali, who is the Secretary General of Asayibah al-Haq, he said, oh, I'd love to be under, have our arms under state control. It's great because we're now one of the most powerful organs of state. It's this kabuki dance of we're going to, quote unquote, give up arms. They were never going to do that. Groups like this also assist in kind of the front groups that I was talking about before, because they actually help them on the back end in terms of helping media out. Asaybat al-Haq also has domestic arms production that they've learned from the Iranians. They produce their own IRAMs. This was a huge thing that they would push out during the anti-ISIS campaign. So looking at organizations like that, they may not take what I would call kind of the sexy approach, where they're popping off drones and doing other things, but the moves that they're making and the interactions and coordination they have with those other core groups, I do think that needs a hell of a lot more focus, because it's demonstrating how cohesively the IRGC is running them.
Yeah. Thanks. I think also you did some research on the groups in Bahrain. So, Philip, what can you say about maybe Bahraini groups?
Yes. So in Bahrain, I wrote the first profiles on them, and the interesting thing is, in Bahrain, they used that same program that they're using now in Iraq. There was essentially a core network. Let's call it the Sarai al-Ashtar network, because that was the first group that announced itself. There were people that were pulled out of the protest movements there, and then taught how to build bombs, how to build domestic homemade shotguns, do other violent attacks against Bahraini police or U.S. Marines. But again, you would see a multitude of different groups taking credit for some of these attacks and also manufacturing fake ones. And essentially, when you look back at where a lot of that support for them came from, it was Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq. And I would say, now Bahrain, given I'm more of a Levantine guy, I love Lebanon, Lebanese Arabic. Bahrain was always a new kind of thing for me, looking at a lot of that, but it was fascinating in terms of how more demonstrative of what the IRGC does, especially in the Gulf, in terms of pushing kind of military pressure than, let's say, than using a Lebanese Hezbollah. I would say that, looking at Bahrain, because it has a Shia majority population, they have a Sunni monarchy, there's a sectarian angle there with the Islamic Republic, and also with Iran. There were claims of Bahrain actually being part of Iran, so there's a territorial issue that's there as well. So you have the religious issue, you've got a sectarian issue, you have national borders issue, and then you also have Bahrainis where, in terms of religious ideology and religious thinking, you have a large collection of people who are, and when I say Shiraziyin, not every Shirazi is created equal, and not everyone believes the same thing. But I will say that in general, a lot of the Shirazi kind of thinking is a little bit more radical. Do they like the Khomeinis? Not so much, but they'll work with them when it comes to targeting, the Bahraini government. But I think we are lucky in a way, from a U.S. perspective, that these groups, there was a quite an effective crackdown on them from 2014 to 2018, because if that had not been taken care of, I can promise you there would be other domestic bombings, targeting of Americans. These guys had demonstrated use of advanced weapon systems, including some of the earliest utilizations of UAVs. They actually broke some of their guys out of Bahraini prison. They were not messing around. So I would say in that kind of context, this is also another reason why the Iranians are lobbing ballistic missiles and lobbing Shahed 136s at the Bahrainis.
Yeah. Thanks, Philip. Al-Basha, you already talked about Hezbollah. So do you think any groups we should be tracking very close in Syria? Because I think right after October 7, we saw IRA, Islamic resistance in Iraq was very active. So what about the current situation, and what groups we should be watching very closely in Syria?
Yeah, I mean, for Hezbollah, I want to highlight a few things. I think Hezbollah was the first experiment in the 80s, and Iran invested, the numbers that was publicly mentioned over the years was around $600 million in investment. So Hezbollah was built from scratch with Iranian funding. The group believes in velayat-e. They believe in that the murshid is, sort of like a pope-like figure, that he's holding on the seat till the 12th Imam comes back. So they believe in that group, and they believe in that ideology. And Hezbollah, compared to Iraq, there's multiple groups, not a united leadership. And Hezbollah, there's cohesion. There's one leader, one group, one structure. They have a setup like a conventional military. I mean, they're special forces, the Radwan forces, but they have a missile and drone forces and air defense forces, reserve forces. an engineering course. So they have what looks like a conventional military. It's the numbers for how many fighters they have ranges between 20,000 to 50,000. People sometimes claim that they could rally 100,000. I think it's safe just to say it's in the low tens of thousands. But we've seen over the years that even like a group in Yemen, AQAP Al Qaeda, with like 2 or 3,000 could create a lot of chaos. And so with Hezbollah, it was the model where other groups was supposed to, sort of like, you have the franchise for the Islamic revolution in the region, and you're going to help the groups in Syria and also the groups in Yemen and Iraq and other parts of the world to set up the model of how to set it up. When you look at Hamas, that's different, because Hamas does not believe in velayat al-faqih. It doesn't have that religious doctrine, but however, there was significant military, financial, logistical investment that Iran did to Hamas to build that cohesion under the axis of resistance. So yes, there are groups they believe in velayat al-faqih, and I think their loyalty to the regime is going to be higher than the other groups, especially the ones in Iraq. But something that we also, Philip, just to add on Iraq, that caught me by surprise this week was Sistani issued a fatwa supporting the accession of Mujtaba Khamenei. And you go back in history, and there's this whole debate that the Shia seat is, it's not in in Iran, that the Shia seat should be in Najaf, and Karbala is the holy place. So this kind of like, this whole, and part of it too, I have to admit, there's discrimination between the Arabs and the Persians about who should be leading this movement, should be, the Persians or the Arabs. But at the end of the day, with the oil, the Islamic regime was able to fund and pay and manufacture and build all these weapons. And you see the rockets, the drones, they have, the Shahid 101 in Iraq, they will call it. Sorry, I forgot the name, but basically they all have the same model and the same delta wing, the same fixed wing, the same designs, even to the fence, but different. But it's just it's a copy paste, but it's different namings, but it all comes from the same designer, the same manufacturer. And then it becomes like, I call it as assembly of cars. So you have a Fiat manufactured in Egypt, it's the assembly in Egypt, but it's still, it's still Fiat. And so, and all these groups are just doing this copy paste of one of the key points that weakened Hezbollah, and always Hezbollah, when they intervened after the Arab Spring in Syria, was because of the G-log, the ground's line of communications connecting Hezbollah Lebanon territory to Iran via Syria, via Iraq. So that was their lifeline. That's why they sent the forces to Syria to fight and to try to save al-Assad's regime. And I think that by itself exposed Hezbollah. And for all of us in the OSINT community, we were able to find out their commanders' names. And right now, with such high rate of assassinations and targeting, Hezbollah has been not announcing the new names of the replacements of, and it has become comical, like this is the number 3 guy replacing the number 2, and so on and so on. I still believe that the regime has other tools in its pocket that's not shared, that they haven't shown us yet. And I think once they get desperate in Iran, or maybe they get desperate with Hezbollah, that we're gonna could see other groups popping out throughout the world, not just in the region.
Thanks, Al-Basha. I want to turn our attention to IRGC, and I have a question for Dr. Roshandel. So from your experience within Iran's diplomatic system, how do you assess the internal dynamics around succession and the role of Revolutionary Guard may play in shaping the next phase of governance?
Yeah, thank you so much. Based on what we talked before, I need to give you some background of IRGC activities in politics. When Ali Khamenei, as the second leader, accepted to be the second leader, It was the time that Iran and Iraq war has ended, and the commanders who were supporting Ali Khamenei to get this job, they came back to the capitals and they decided to work with him to create a very strong networking that controlled the society based on the threats coming from his opponents or any people who are not agree with Ali Khamenei, even inside of their religions. I can give you some names like Azari Qawmi. Most of them had been eliminated by Ali Khamenei unknowingly. But from that time, IRGC started to work with Ali Khamenei to control any president as the government was starting. We can call Ali Khatami as the president who was representing the reformist policy. After one and a half years, there were some inside of the Iranian dormitory protest, and they could suppress the students, the college students, very badly, and other people on the street. From that time, the radical people inside of the IRGC, they started to control the Khatami's government until he finished, and we see Ahmadinejad. Ahmadinejad's 8 years presidency is showing that full of dealings, secret dealings with IRGC. He had some of his cabinet members elected from among the IRGC members. For example, the Secretary of Oil and some other people, they were able to have great access to the money Iran was selling, the oil, and they were mobilizing the proxy groups and some other things that we are not right now talking about that. But after Ahmadinejad, we see Hassan Rouhani. Hassan Rouhani, when he started his presidential time, he noticed that there is a one power is in the same level of the sovereignty with Ali Khamenei. They share is the IRGC. They have great control, and they are trying to get more privileges from Hassan Rouhani. Hassan Rouhani's government only had they had lots of restrictions how to manage the foreign policy, except in Iranian atomic activities negotiation. And Javad Zarif was the person who could get this profile, and he managed everything based on what he was thinking they can do. They brought it from the Iran's national committee to State Department to manage everything to reach an agreement with the United States on nuclear activities. After Hassan Rouhani, we see that IRGC pushed Ali Khamenei to choose the very weak, and I can say that it's a very weak person as a president, which is the name is Raisi, and he was the student of Ali Khamenei in many years ago, 2-3 decades before that. So after Raisi eliminated or got killed, right now we see IRGC showing more strong power to spread the control on the leadership. And right now I can clearly see that Moshtaba Khamenei has been elected by IRGC. And the letter we saw he published today, most of the terms, most of the ideas shows that IRGC has great control on it. And probably they had some idea they asked him to put in the letter. And what I can connect my last expression about this IRGC power, right now IRGC noticed that in the proxy war, in the proxy groups they were supporting, probably I heard very good point of views you shared with me, but this is very important you know that. After almost 10 months ago, the first war between Israel and Iran and the elimination of the most proxy wars leaders who were actively able to share their strategic point of views with Iranian commanders, the IRGC commanders. Right now, after their elimination, the second level of the commanders in proxy groups overseas, they are only handling the executive orders Iran can issue to spread the terroristic attacks. But we have to notice that at the same time, IRGC controlling the power inside of Iran to suppress the people brutally. We saw 2 months ago, the estimated number is over 90,000 people. Right now, we have to see that how they are going to introduce Moshtaba Khamenei and they protect him. But in the final point here is Iran's erosion of the legitimacy about the Shia and the velayat-e faqih, or anything as we call the handling by the Iranian religion system. It gives the opportunity to the people to push IRGC back. And if you follow the news, anybody got killed from the IRGC members, Iranian people shows their happiness. This is phenomenal.
Yep. Thanks, Ibrahim. So, what about talking about some Arab countries involved in the war? So, Al-Shara, what we have seen so far, these Arab countries that have already been drawn into the conflict. So, how do you explain why these Arab countries have become involved, and how do you assess Iran's strategy of expanding the conflict across multiple fronts in the Middle East?
I think now we can, if we are going to zoom out of course, the front line is for this conflict is the Gulf states. But if we have like a scenarios is about who is going to likely to join this war. It depends on, and also it's related to Houthis in the same time. Like we have like factors of for example, if the Saudis, if the Saudis going to, for example, to join the war, of course the Houthis will do that. This is a kind of factors of broader Houthis escalation could be linked with several factors. The extension of the war, that if especially if the period of the war and is going to be extended, and also other things if there is a regional expansion of the war. For example, if the Saudis is going to join the war, of course the Houthis, and there is like a kind of investigation because one of the Saudis oil facilities in Eastern Desert has been attacked, and they are adapting that Houthis are involved on this kind of attack. And this is a kind of investigation that because the Saudis, they want to know whether the Houthis engaged in this attack or not. Other things also from the Houthi side, I think that the Houthis are avoiding if they are going to join, they are going to avoid to attack the Saudis. They are going to target Red Sea and maritime the Red Sea maritime security and also American installations, UAE and Bahrain. Houthis likely are going to avoid Saudis because Saudis, they have their allies in the ground, which is the Yemeni government, and which could be like an high price is going to be a high and costly price for this war for the Houthis, because Houthis nowadays they want to avoid any battle or in the ground or domestic conflict in the ground. It's easier for Houthis for a cross-border hostility. Houthis, they have an aggressive cross-border tendency. Nowadays, they don't want to reopen a domestic front line. It's going to be expensive for them. Other factor also is of joining the Houthis also linked with Hezbollah. because if Hezbollah is going to be under the pressure, increase the pressure on Hezbollah in as a specific or in general as an axis of resistance is going to be under the pressure. Houthis also particularly are going to also to intervene. We don't also forget the Gaza because Gaza is very important as a narrative, as building the narrative. It's kind of a center attention as a key element that provide a moral legitimacy and political justification for potential escalation. And we all Houthis, they try to build this narrative and linked Gaza also with Iran. Because they cannot even link Iran. This is the idea that the Houthis cannot build a narrative like Gaza for join the war. They need a political or justification and moral legitimacy. Other factors. That's it. This is I think this is my idea.
Thanks, Shara. So we have just 3 minutes. And I want to ask to our each of panelists. So in one sentence, what is the single development related to Iran that analysts should watch most closely in the coming months? So what about lone actors, self-radicalization in the Western world, or some other issues related to this question? Philip?
I think in terms of what operations they're actually able to carry out overseas, I think that's one of the biggest things. I think looking today, there was already an attack in Michigan on a synagogue within Europe, where there's a large population. There's actually a very large population of supporters for many Iraqi Shia militias, for a lot of for Lebanese Hezbollah, and religious followers that have lived as refugees. I can tell you, I've interviewed some of these guys in some pretty interesting places in Scandinavia. It's how the Iranians are going to essentially turn them on, flip the switch to make them start doing things. And we're already seeing it trickle out in kind of these little styles of attacks. What worries me in another end is it's the people who might not be those discussing, let's say, absolute velayat-e and understanding it. It's the people who see that that Khamenei was killed. They know he's a religious leader. They don't know the difference between Shia and Sunni, and they decide they need to shoot something up to show support. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. But I think the attacks that are going on in Europe, because there is a far firmer and better kind of networking structure that the IRGC has kind of controlled and kind of allowed to kind of metastasize within Europe. I think watching that and then seeing how that reverberates across the Atlantic into the United States, there will be a lot that moves there. Regionally speaking, in terms of where certain groups are going, and I kind of going back to this as kind of a big development. I would make the argument to watch kind of the major political players within Iraq's parliament to kind of see where they're going to push certain things. And I think watching the Badr organization and how they have maintained loyalty for the Iranians, despite the fact that some analysts will say, oh, but we could use them as a back channel to Iran or whatever else, believing that because they're not participating in, let's say, a drone attack or a rocket attack, that all of a sudden these guys are quote unquote moderate. I think watching their moves, watch their statements, watch how they are acting within the Shia militia structure that they are part of in Al-Hashd al-Shabi, and also how they're behaving within Iraq's parliament. Because I use Badr as just one example, but watching them will tell you, no, these guys are on page. They are happy to work directly with the Iranians and with the IRGC. And beyond that, maybe the IRGC doesn't need to use them for a lot of their attacks and the structures that they want to go, the architecture they want to use for attacking Western interests or the Israelis or anything else. I view this too as, and I don't think the Iranians are given enough credit for this, just because you have one section of their guys fighting, it doesn't mean they're not doing another strategic plan on the other end. And they have done this with those organizations for decades. So the further they can claw their way into government holdings, get some money out of them, build and kind of maintain the structures that they like, whether they're criminal, they're legitimate through government, or they're just through corruption. I think that's ongoing. I think it demonstrates that there is still long-term planning and thinking that's going ahead with a lot of those organizations.
Thank you. Thanks, Philip. So great points. In one sentence, Al-Basha, what do you think? The single development.
Um, I think will be if the U.S. decides to deploy the army to Iraq and to the region. I think that will indicate where we headed with this conflict. I don't see currently an off ramp, and this is one of those questions that I'm not sure I could even answer it to when my clients ask me is like, have we crossed the point of no return? I think this conflict has been brewing for 47 years. And if anybody is surprised with what's happening right now, that have not been following closely the challenges that the Iranian regime has been furnishing to the U.S. government and to the U.S. military, particularly. And so this is something that was in the works for some time. Is this the right way to go? Are we in the right path? Time will tell.
Yeah. Thanks, Basha. So, Ibrahim?
Yeah. I think that we have to make very clear division inside what we need to know about that. Based on what Iranian regime tried to use Ali Sistani as the leader of Shias in Iraq to advertise that he's going to issue a fatwa against United States after Ali Khamenei killed, and it didn't work. There are something that I see. It shows that IRGC members and Iranian intelligence service are working on creating some irregular warfare tactics, which can be very active in Arabic countries and Middle East because Iran has great networking in these countries by using some ideological ideas and brainwash of some people. But in United States and Canada, mainly, I can use the same things, the recommendation I gave to some of the European Union Parliament members last year, that Iran is trying to create some militant cells, and they are looking for some people, not they are local people, they are from Afghan, some other Eastern European, some Bosnian people, they are Muslim, but they have some problem on legal residential status and some other problems, the visa issues. Iranian regime tried to use these tactics. On the other side, some of the people who came to the United States in President Obama's presidential time, right now they have spread inside of the United States. They have some limited access to the media. They make programs. Sometimes they attack me because of my clear messages that what they are going to do in the future. But in general, I believe that Iran's intelligence system, in working with the proxy groups, they clearly reached to an agreement that they cannot use the telecommunication system like before after the mobile explosion happened in Lebanon. So what they need to do, they are going to target some citizens in the United States, from the United States or Europeans in some countries. These are, I believe, that predictable from now, or maybe some commercial centers and also diplomatic areas. It is very well organized, but they are not huge like the proxy groups like Hamas or Hezbollah or other Iraqi groups. We see them like Hashd al-Shabi, which they came to Iran 6 months ago to help the government to suppress the people. Right now, they have come back to Iraq, and Iraq government should control all of them. These are the things that we believe that we have to work on it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Roshandal. And last but not least, Shara. So, what's your one sentence?
Yes, I won't talk to take too much time. I think we should focus about Ibrahim when he mentioned the scenarios, the three scenarios, and we see the possible scenarios. We couldn't right now to answer it right now. Maybe it could be another session It could be a possible scenario for the Iranian regime and their impact on Iranian proxies. We can link it to the Iranian proxies because I'm seeing now there is a lot of focus about the central ideas, which is the nuclear program and the missile program. But I don't see that much focusing about the what might happen to the Iranian proxies groups in the region, in Iraq, in Lebanon, and Yemen. We cannot answer it right now, but it could be another session.
Yeah, thanks so much. I agree. We should definitely do another session. So we are really at a moment where military actions, leadership transitions, and digital proxy dynamics are intersecting in ways that could shape Middle Eastern geopolitics for years to come. And I would like to thank to our distinguished panelists for their insights and our audience for joining us today. So we'll continue HS Today's webinars, and then just stay in touch and stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.